4. In accordance with the town board's adoption of local law number 14 of 2022, the board's meetings are being held both in person at Town Hall and via video conference through Zoom webinar. The link to participate in this meeting via video conference can be found on the town's website at the town clerk's agendas and meetings portal. You can also watch the live stream video and submit written comments for the public record through the town website. If you are attending via Zoom and wish to speak during this meeting, then please click the raise hand icon. As a reminder to all applicants, agents, and members of the public who wish to speak at the meeting, please state your name and hamlet of residence for the record. Thank you. I invite all to rise, salute to a flag, and then observe a moment of silence in memory of 9/11.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First on the agenda is the acceptance of the August 14th, 2024 minutes as written and/or amended, and also August 28th, 2024 minutes as written and/or amended. Just for the record, I did listen to the tapes last time, although I was absent from the meeting, so I'm allowed to vote on those minutes. Is there a motion for the August 14th minutes?
So moved. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I abstain. I wasn't there.
August 28th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And one abstention. Public hearings, A019131 Lynn Prue Revocable Trust. Aram, you're on.
I think Dennis is
Oh, Dennis, you're on too.
Dennis Downs, 49 Crescent Street, Sag Harbor, New York, attorney for the applicant. I know we've adjourned this case many, many times because we've been trying to get the evidence that you're going to need to hear tonight. Aram Tekechian has prepared a report, which we obviously don't expect you to read right now. We would like you to read it over the next week or so, and then we'll come back and discuss it in further detail. So with that, I'll ask Aram to step up to the microphone.
Thank you, Dennis. For the record, Aram Tertunian, First Coastal, West Hampton Beach, New York, for the applicant. Let me start by apologizing to the board and Marty for dropping a 25-page report on you 2 hours ago. But with your indulgence, I'd just like to go over the highlights, get some initial reactions and some questions, and reschedule to go in depth on what we've put together. Okay. So what I did in this report was, first of all, to characterize the site itself, a description of the site and what's occurred on the site. I then did a description of what the geomorphology and the coastal processes that are occurring on the site. Then I looked at what the regional shoreline looks like. And then I went through a series of alternatives, reviewing the positive and negative aspects of each alternative as it applies to this property and our project goals, which are obviously to stabilize the bluff erosion. So with that as a background, everybody knows where this is on the shores of Little Peconic Bay. The property currently has a rock gabion structure. Gabions are wire baskets filled with rocks that are stacked and fastened together, and the purpose is to absorb wave attack and protect the upland. That structure was installed sometime in around 1990. Based on aerial photos, it survived pretty well up until about 2014, 2016, at which point it began to be damaged in the center part. What I assume has happened, since I wasn't there, but based upon that evidence and the impacts of Superstorm Sandy, which had a storm surge of about 6.5 feet at this location. What's likely has occurred is it was damaged during Sandy, and then slowly over the subsequent years began to break down as waves attacked it more and more. In the file, which I've reviewed, there are a lot of documents already. And one of them is the DeLandro Andrews report from 2021. I used that report in my analysis as well. But the other interesting thing about the site is that only about half of the site has the gabions. This area here on the southern part is actually a natural shoreline, and you can see there's been significantly more erosion in that area, in the southern area, than in the northern area, although there's been quite a bit of erosion there as well. The rate of erosion is approximately 1.1 feet per year since 2014, since 2001 rather. But in this area on the south, most of that erosion occurred literally in the last decade. So the rate, that's about a 26 to 27 foot recession. So that's a rate of about 2.5 feet per year, which is pretty significant. And on page 7 of the report, you can see the bluff crest analysis that I did, which we used to get those numbers. The various bluff crests are identified by different colors, blue, green, and red. Hopefully nobody's colorblind, but they are labeled as well. And so you can see that there's a portion on the north, which is actually pretty stable, a small piece in the middle that's pretty stable, but you have erosion in the center of where the gabions are, and significant erosion in the southern natural area. So that just shows us, what's happened over time. I then did a more in-depth look at the bluff and the beach itself to try to understand what it is. And on page 8, you'll see some photographs of the. I didn't put those up there. Some photographs of this bluff and what's happening here. So the process that's occurring here is classic toe scour due to wave attack. It creates a oversteepened bluff face. Rain, wind, and gravity act on that and cause the bluff to collapse. That collapse can be slowly over time or catastrophic. And in this photo 7, what I've pointed out for you in the center is an alluvial fan. That's material that's coming down the face of the bluff and spilling onto the beach. And also to the left and right of it, there are deeply incised stormwater runoff channels that are called rills. So that's the mechanism that's occurring on this site. You have erosion at the toe caused by wave attack. Then you have wind and water attacking the face of it and causing the material to slump down. The beach itself here is kind of interesting, though, because like most Peconic beaches, it's only sandy in the summertime. In the wintertime, it's really a pebbly, cobbly beach. And figure 9 on page 9 is an example of that in front of this property. It's just important to understand the characteristics of the beach, and understand that the composition of the bluff is not really the composition of the beach. If you look at figure 10 on page 10, the bluff itself is made up primarily of very fine material, sand and very fine sand, with a small fraction of pebbles and some cobbles, and obviously somewhere in there some big glacial erratic boulders. But that material is so fine, it's not really resident on the beach year-round. It's there in the summer when the waves are much reduced, and then when we get storms or winter activity, you really have a pebbly, cobbly beach. The other thing that is really critically important here is to know the direction that sand is traveling. So in this particular case, if you look on page 11, on figure 11, this is a study that was done in 1977 by M.T. Issel, who pretty much got it right throughout all of the Peconic and Gardiner's Bay shorelines. And here the sand is moving from south to north up towards Morton and the long spit there at Jessup's Neck. So that's the direction of sand transport, and that's important because we got to know from where the sand is coming from and where it's going. I just put in there some information. This is on figure 12 is the storm surge data from the United States Geological Survey for Superstorm Sandy, and you can see there was a surge elevation of 6.5. I think that's a good reference point. All of us remember Sandy. It's a type of thing that caused a lot of damage, and providing protection against something like that or something similar to that is a reasonable standard. I referenced earlier the DeLandro Andrews report from 21, where they went through their calculations of wave energy and wave heights. And they had a wave height of 7.5 is what they calculated in their study. And that's verified verifying of what FEMA says here. FEMA predicts an 8-foot storm surge in this location. So those are in close correlation to each other. Again, this helps us just understand the site. The last thing I go into, not the last thing, but one other site characteristic I go into on page 14 in table 1 is sea level rise. So New York State has passed a law that requires state agencies to evaluate the impact of sea level rise on projects. It's not mandatory, but it's recommended. And from a site characteristic point of view and from a project design point of view, it's a pretty important factor. And this project, should it be approved, would be expected to have a 30-year lifetime. That pushes you into the 2050s. And if you take the medium projection for 2050, that's 16 inches. Why is that important? Because all your storm surges are going to be 16 inches higher. So whatever it is that we're looking at today in the predictive models, we pretty much need to add 16 inches to them. So again, a really important consideration when you're looking at how different alternatives are going to perform at the site. Next thing I did was I wanted to place this particular property in context with the shoreline. So if you go to page 16 and figure 14, I took the area from Morton Wildlife Refuge all the way down to just a little bit south of Whalebone Landing Road. And what I did there was I said, well, you know, which part of the shoreline is natural and which part of the shoreline is modified? And so this table 2 gives you that information. So over 80% is modified and less than 20% is natural, including that this stretch from Morton all the way down to our subject site is about 4,000 feet of modified shoreline, otherwise protected. And you can see the green items are pretty small. So with that background, went into look at a number of alternatives, including the one that staff had recommended. So alternative 1 is just repair the existing gabion. The applicant has a right to repair that gabion and put it back into its original shape. Number 2 is to go to the bluff and place sand with or without vegetation or with or without core logs to stabilize the face of the bluff. The third one I evaluated was to install a staggered boulder field, which is what staff recommended we look at. And then the third was to install a rock revetment at the toe of the bluff and then to stabilize the upper part of the bluff with a mixture of erosion control matting, core logs, and vegetation, native vegetation, obviously. So in looking at those alternatives, and I'll just go through them very quickly, and happy to respond to any questions. Repairing the existing gabion structure is really not a practicable alternative. First of all, the structure at some points is more than 30 feet seaward of the existing toe of the bluff. So really what it would be doing is, just basically creating a speed bump because it's pretty much now at or near the high water line. And in that situation, it's going to be overtopped in even less than a 10-year storm. Whatever fill is behind it to stabilize, it's going to be washed away and it's going to be damaged again. And then the bluff is going to be exposed to wave action again. So that even though it's something that they're allowed to do, it's not something that's going to achieve the goal at the site. The second item is to place sand with or without vegetation and/or core logs and erosion control matting. So I give you a couple of examples of those, and we've done a lot of these. We've done these on a lot of different shorelines over the course of decades. So figure 15 is an example of an embankment that's on page 18, an embankment that contains core logs, which are these, they're about 12 to 18 inches in diameter. They're staked in, and then erosion control matting, which helps stabilize the slope, and then planting beach grass through there. And this is very effective when you have when you have a much wider beach and when you don't have wave attack. Because if you turn the page and you go to figure 16, this is what happens to these structures when you have wave attack. They're not designed to withstand waves. And in this case, even the 10-year storm wave is 4.5 feet. So this is a project we did on Shinnecock Bay, and you can see that despite the fact that we had really done everything, by the book, that alternative will simply not match the forces that impinge on this site. The next thing we looked at was a staggered boulder field, and we looked at two different sites when evaluating that. So there's a site that's referenced in the staff report about immediately abutting to the south of the project, which seems to conform with 3 properties on Rawson Road, as well as the stair access for Rawson Road estates. And that structure appears to have been installed somewhere around. Hold it, I got to read it in here because I can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say before 2012. I thought I put it in here, but I didn't. So I have to go back and look at that. But it's been in place for at least a decade, and we looked at it. We looked at it using aerial photos, and have been to the site many times for the 12-year period between 2012 and 2024. And our takeaway is that this type of an arrangement is not functioning to protect the bluff, and it has all of the other potential adverse impacts of any other structure, which in this particular case, if you look on page 21 and look at figures 18 and 19, figure 18 is a drone shot that we took in 2020, and you can see that the boulders are far separated from the toe of the bluff, which means that they were installed at the toe of the bluff when they were put in, and the storm surge and the waves have overtopped that. They've attacked the toe of the bluff, eroded it away, the bluff slumped down, and then the same thing occurred again. And if you look at the ground photos, which took just about a week or 10 days ago, I think, what is the date? That's an interesting date, 09/0/45. I think that would be September 5th, though, if I recall correctly. You can see there's a big separation between where the stones are and where the toe of the bluff is. And you can see those features I described to you earlier, such as the rills and the alluvial fan, are all occurring on that bluff face, indicative of ongoing erosion. And if you look at both at figure 18 on page 21, you'll see that these stones are at or close to the high water line, which means your beach access is being impeded. So we also looked at another site. This was on Robbins Island, which is also in the Peconic Bay system, although in a different town. It's in the town of Southold. And we looked at 2 aerial photos from 2014 and 2024. And, our takeaway in looking at these 2 is it didn't protect the bluff. And now, if you look at the photos, those rocks are basically, they occupy the entire beach, and part of them are in the water. So we have a situation where the bluff is not protected, and there's basically no dry sand beach. That doesn't achieve any of the project objectives. So the last thing that we looked at was a rock revetment at the toe with bluff restoration and erosion control matting. So that example is on page 23, figure 22 over here. And this is a project, it's not local, it's in Sands Point, which actually has a much greater wave, and that's why it's actually a much larger structure than what would be proposed at this site. But you can see that, there's mature vegetation on the upper bluff, which was restored. The rocks, although exposed, there's still a sandy beach in front of them. One of the reasons that this project works so well is if you look in the center of the photo, the property adjacent to it is out, also has a structure which is out a little bit further. And that's one of the things about this site that makes the rock revetment with the upper bluff stabilization the more practicable alternative. And that is because both to the north, which is a bulkhead, it actually extends further seaward than even the existing rock gabion. And to the south, these rocks here on Rawson Estates actually extend farther into the water than where the proposed revetment, which is at the toe of this eroded bluff. So we actually are in a bit of a pocket here, where so the northern bulkhead and the southern rocks are actually getting the wave energy focused on them, and the waves refract into this little mini cove. The other part that makes this revetment, I think, most suitable for this site is the fact that the sand transport is up here towards the spit. So as we know, sand is going to be derived from erosion of the shore face here and moved up into this area. And one of the concerns always is with structures is how are you going to affect the downdrift beach? In this case, there is no downdrift beach. There's downdrift 4,000 linear feet of shoreline that's been modified with bulkheads or revetments or some other thing. So there's no beach there to be preserved. Those two factors, which are having the two headlands north and south, and the fact that there is no downdrift beach to protect, really speak to the revetment with the vegetative stabilization on top as the preferred alternative. And that gets into the mitigation measures, which I've spoken about on page 24. Removing the existing gabion structure, which I think everybody can agree has served its purpose. Pushing the structure as much as 30 feet back to the toe of the existing eroded bluff. And then stabilizing the upper bluff, and then what I just talked about the littoral transport and the fact that there's no downdrift beach to be impacted. And then just a comment about other regulatory approvals. The only other agency that has regulatory approval here is the DEC. They've actually issued a permit for the stone armor revetment, is what they called it. And you can see that they have two conditions. Number one, the revetment should not extrude further seaward than the existing toe of the bluff. That's what we recommended. And that the height should be no more than 4 feet above grade. The applicant agreed with both of those conditions, and they issued a permit to that effect, which I've attached a summary of. So I haven't gone into a whole revetment design here and why we choose certain size rock and that type of thing, because I just really wanted to describe the specific site, the regional area, and what these different alternatives look like. So I appreciate the time and happy to answer any questions.
One question I have is you started your talk by outlining your goal of stabilizing the shoreline. Would you like to unpack that a little bit? How much erosion will be tolerated or not tolerated? Can you quantify that?
Can't really quantify that, but what I can talk about is the conversations I had with the New York State DEC regarding that issue, and they kind of put a fine point on it, and they said, "Listen, let me paraphrase. They said, hey, listen, Aram, we're in the erosion control business. We're not in the erosion elimination business. So all of these properties to the north, they're in the erosion elimination business. It's already been done. There's no more erosion on those, and nor will there be because people will rebuild them. What the DEC is looking at, they've developed a standard of 2.5 tons of rock per linear foot of beach, and that's what gets to the no more than 4 feet above the beach, because that's how much rock there is in 2.5 tons of rock. And their point is that structure is going to be overtopped in some storm, and the bluff is going to be eroded to some degree, and that is going to yield some sand out onto the beach. They haven't quantified that. They've just said, we've looked at a whole bunch of these, and that's what we see. So how much will be tolerated? I can't give you an answer, but I can tell you it's going to occur. It's just going to be a whole heck of a lot less than it is now, and it's going to be controlled because now we have, with the stabilization at the toe, even if there's overtopping, that damage can be repaired, or if there is actual retreat of the bluff crest, it's not going to be 2.5 feet a year. So hopefully I speak to your question.
And is your client willing to give up the beach?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but my opinion is that because of this is has these two headlands and is a bit of a pocket, that if there's going to be any beach left, it's going to be there.
Is the most important part of this project the area that is unrevetted?
Well, I think that's the most critical part because that's where the erosion is the greatest. But I think, one thing I've learned from doing this for more than a week is that you need to treat the whole area in a consistent manner, and that inconsistently treating different parts of it doesn't usually work as well.
If a cove is developed, it continues to develop, as you suggested that it has started to develop because of a neighbor's projects. Have you seen any studies that would indicate how much of a cove would continue to develop before it equalized?
Yeah, there are mathematical models that do that. My colleague Kevin Bodge, classmate of University of Delaware, is the guy who wrote the study on that. I'd be happy to provide that to the board. There's a ratio between the distance between the two headlands and the distance back that the beach will stabilize. So yeah, that exists. I think it's like 1 to 1.65, but don't quote me. It varies based on the wave climate. So it could be 1 to 1.3 or 1 to 1.6, depending on the wave climate.
So I'm looking at your analysis of the alternatives, and you've arrived at what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think back to is the it's a very different scenario, but there's a concept there that I want to try to get across, and that is when I have observed some wave action in the Caribbean, the ocean can be quite rough. And of course, a lot of that is bouncing onto rocks, so it's not a big deal. But there are places where the ocean is rough, and then there's a much more shallow area inside, which is still fairly deep, way over my head. But there's no waves to speak of there because of the rock formations that absorb that energy and prevent that power from coming into the shallower areas, the coves, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the concept that I'm thinking about is this. Your chosen method of solving the problem doesn't appear to do anything to absorb the energy of the wave, but rather put a big blockade there to take the hit every single time the wave crashes, as opposed to the Caribbean, where those rock formations dispel that energy and don't let it proceed to the beach area, so the beaches continue to grow. Now, those beaches grow differently than here. They're often growing by parrotfish spitting out sand, as opposed to erosion from the bluff, which is often rocky, being a relatively new volcanic area. But the concept is this: you've got something in the water there to absorb that energy, so that by the time the water gets to the shore, it has less energy. And that existing gabion, having that space between the toe of the bluff and the water, begins to do a little bit of that, but not entirely. But that's the sort of thing that is attractive to me, not just on your client's property, but across that whole shoreline for probably miles, because there's similar problems on a lot of properties.
Yeah, there really are, and so I'll respond to that this way. Number one, I agree. I've seen the same thing, and the Caribbean's classic for pocket beaches. They don't have these long beaches like we have here. We're very different, but they have those pocket beaches for a couple of reasons. One is offshore reefs of varying types, whether it's rock or coral or what have you, and also because there are headlands at, even much more pronounced than what I've showed you here. So, I'm well aware of those situations. There is a technique called living shorelines that we have used very effectively on Mauritius Bay and on Peconic Bay. We actually designed a living shoreline project for Suffolk County at Indian Island Park. And if you go to the end of Circle Drive now, where erosion had exposed native remains a number of decades ago, what you'll find now is a very stable beach with a thriving Spartina marsh and public access. So, and that was just completed this past spring. That was about a 4-year permit process, and it took about 3 months to build. But that is a technique where we use offshore structures to break the wave energy the way that you've described and to create these coves. And we did another one on 612 to 628 Dune Road in West Hampton on Mauritius Bay, which I'd be happy to share with the board at another meeting, where we had these 8 properties and we did a series of segmented offshore breakwaters. And prior to the project, the water had gone underneath and it was about halfway through 3 different pools. We now have a stable crescent beach along that entire shoreline. Has been in place now for, I think we're in our 4th season, and we've stabilized the shoreline with Spartina grasses, and it's doing really well. So we're very familiar with that. We understand it. We like it. We want to use it. There's a small problem on this particular site is that it's one property. So I'd be happy to go back and do some more research on that to see if it's feasible to be done here. But typically what we would do, we'll look at the survey that Marty was kind enough to put up. Typically what we would do would be to build a breakwater here and a breakwater here on the north and on the south, again with a prescribed gap, the way I described to you that ratio. And that's what creates the stable crescent beach. The problem is we're not on that property, and we're not on this property, we're on this property. And it's also tricky, let me put it that way, that's a term of art, not engineering. It's tricky when you're doing one property on a long stretch. But I'm happy to look at it and see if it's something that would fit here.
I'm just throwing out some ideas and just musings. What I really look forward to is for Marty to analyze this and give us a report at some future date.
Yeah.
Good evening, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. As indicated, we only got this report at 5:03. In fact, I still don't have a copy of the report. so I was not able to follow the testimony well. So there will be a need to adjourn the hearing for at least a month so that I have an opportunity to review the submittal. That being said, I'll make several quick comments. First of all, as this board well knows, bluff erosion is a natural process. It's a process that's essential to the natural coastal dynamics and the ecosystem of the area. When bluffs erode, they contribute that essential sediment to the beach, which aids in rebuilding that beach. As is the case at this property when the headland is forested and you have trees that fall. Those trees, if left alone, also began to stabilize the base of that vertical shear dune, enabling that area to catch more sand for vegetation to grow and for the shape of the vertical bluff to gradually change and to stabilize over time. So although the erosion, of course, is affected by the partial gabion on this property and proximate bulkheads, even if none of the base shoreline was armored in this region, you would expect to see significant bluff erosion at times, especially with the considerable fetch and wave attack that occurs in this area. So when we look at applications like this, we need to give consideration to the natural ecosystem and the natural processes. And if we do look to try and enhance that ecosystem, we need to do it in a way that models the natural system. The second point I wanted to make is that there are no emergencies at this site, which would warrant armoring of this beach. This, as you can see, is a very large piece of property, a very deep forested property. There is an existing residence, but that residence is located at a considerable distance, well over 100 feet from the portion of the bluff that is eroding, and it's behind the gabions. So even if the erosion continues at this location, certainly in the short term and unlikely in the long term, is it going to put this existing residence at risk. So when we begin to consider whether or not to permit shore armoring, you only want to consider it as an absolute last resort where there are emergencies and there are no, where residences are imminently threatened with significant damage, and there are no other available options to work with. So even when and if this property is subdivided in the future, it's a large, deep tract. So there is certainly sufficient opportunity to construct additional homes far enough landward. So even though we may not know the exact extent of erosion that will occur at time over the long term, the large property can certainly be developed in a manner so that it won't be affected by erosion. The applicant spoke of the boulders on the properties to the south. As this board knows, those boulders are not in compliance with the Conservation Board permit that was issued many years ago for shore stabilization. And as this board also knows, those landowners and their agent have been directed to come forward with a plan where, with a new plan for shore stabilization that will actually call for removal of a considerable amount of boulders. So the line of heavy boulders that we see to the south is not something that my office or this board had recommended. So it's because of the excessive rock that was placed, it's actually aggravating some of the erosion conditions. I think I heard the applicant say that core logs don't make a lot of sense at a location like this. Core logs are essentially carpet rolls. They're made of coconut and other natural materials. Really only effective in stabilizing embankments along more sluggish streams. They're not effective at sites where you can have heavy wave action and where you have considerable drying from wind and salt, because they're supposed to break down over time and create natural vegetation. What unfortunately happens is the vegetation comes in, they dry out, they get dislodged by storms, and then you'll see them rolling along the shoreline. So I would agree with the applicant's premise that core logs are not a good option for this location. As was alluded to, notwithstanding that there's no need for shore armoring, and that any revetment results in destruction of wetland and beach resources, critical habitat for shorebirds, in the event that the board saw fit to entertain some kind of stabilization along this shoreline, as discussed at prior hearings on this application, and as discussed at length during the hearings for the properties to the south. An approach that might better model a natural Atlantic ecosystem is to come forward with a plan for a scattered boulder field that extends into the water below mean high water, so that and almost down to low water, so that when the surge and the wave action comes in, it's broken up and deflected at many different angles before that heavy wave and surge actually hits the beach. The agent for the landowners to the south, as discussed at a recent hearing, is yet in the process of looking at this option with DEC. So while the applicant may have rightly said that it can be difficult to stabilize just one small portion of a beach without addressing the larger region, it may make sense for the applicant to work with the agent for the properties to the south, and together come forward with a plan to the DEC that allows for scattered boulders of varying size going out into the water. I know the DEC has been very resistant to allowing that, as they oftentimes consider that placement of foreign material within tidal wetlands and say it's an incompatible use. But it does appear based upon communications between Peconic Estuary Program and other regional resource protection groups with DEC, that DEC is beginning to consider a greater flexibility in how to stabilize shorelines. When you place boulders out in the water, similar to erratics that you might see like along the northwest coastline of the village of North Haven and further in Massachusetts, Maine, and other states, you actually create a lot of habitat, not only for various seaweeds and all kinds of sea life, but as often observed, when you have exposed boulders in the water, there's some of the favorite roosting sites for a lot of seabirds. So there is a way to do this potentially in a way that would enhance habitat for seabirds, shorebirds, seaweeds, and other sea life. So the issue, as was mentioned by the board, with creating a revetment, and we've seen this time and time again along the Peconic Bay waterfront, it's notwithstanding the initial deposition of plant of sand and placement of beach grass plugs. It just takes one good storm for all that rock to be exposed. It becomes too costly and burdensome for the landowner to continue to place sand on top of those boulders. And then you have an exposed, essentially vertical wall of boulders, which just as was alluded to by a board member, just becomes a last resort wall when that big wave and big surge comes in. And what happens then is, rather than the wave energy being broken up in various directions from scattered boulders, the force of that energy is directed downward. It scours out the beach more. It deepens the offshore water, then resulting in even bigger waves and more significant surges when storms come again. So I think we've all learned that revetments are not the way to address eroding beaches. And so we need to take a much harder look at what in nature occurs that works well in terms of beach stabilization. And I think the questions that were raised in terms of the long-term, the likely long-term extent of erosion have a lot of merit here, because obviously this property is not going to keep eroding all the way back to Noyac Road. The bluff is going to be shaped, reshaped, may retreat, but it's only going to retreat so far. So I would question the need for any armoring at this property, and also indicate that any permitting of armoring that doesn't result in the protection and enhancement of the wetland, bay, and beach ecosystem is in conflict with the standards for wetland permit issuance. That being said, I think this application still needs a lot of additional work. I, of course, will take the time to review the submittal and provide additional comment. That being said, because I haven't read the report, there's not much else I can offer at this time. So I would ask that the hearing be adjourned for 1 to 2 months to get my office and give the applicant sufficient opportunity to look at practicable alternatives. Thank you.
Do you want to say anything more, or do you want to just go to adjournment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Marty, thanks for your comments. I wrote them down. We're gonna, we're serious people. We're gonna take a serious look. I would just quibble with Marty over the description of a revetment as a vertical wall. It's not. It's a sloping rock revetment. It's got gaps in it. The intentional design of a revetment is to absorb as much wave energy as possible. And yes, there is wave energy reflected. Yes. Is it the same as a vertical wall? Absolutely not. Just, you know me, quibble with little points. But I heard what the board has said. I've listened to what Marty said, and so we'll see in a couple of months, and we'll do some more work.
Thank you, Rob.
We have one hearing scheduled for November 6th, nothing after that. You have a preference?
We just, November.
We have no objection.
That could be a long hearing.
Yes, it could go for hours.
Okay.
And you'd be second up at that.
Can't be weakened by that?
Well, we could do it November 6th.
The one before
because-
has several hearings on it, and the one after is empty, so.
I think I'm gonna be on
November
vacation
20th,
November 6th.
November 20th,
What
November,
date would you?
November 20th?
Let's go 20th.
I was just looking at the calendar to see how close it was to Thanksgiving, in case people are traveling, it's a good week away, so.
So it's 7 p.m., right?
Yes.
7 p.m., yeah.
Is there anyone in the public who'd like to speak in this application? Or on Zoom? Is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn to November 20th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Advisory reports. These are all for the ZBA, 2887 Deerfield Road LLC.
Good evening again, Marty Shade, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. This is a pending variance application before the zoning board of appeals for a property at Deerfield Road in the hamlet of Noyak. There are just two recommended brief advisory comments. The first is that there are no town regulated wetlands within 200 feet of the existing detached garage, for which an area variance is being sought. As such, town wetlands permit is not required in order to legalize this structure. And second, granting of the variance is unlikely to result in any significant adverse environmental impacts.
Motion to send the comments to the ZBA?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Andrew Brandman and Kira Brandman.
This is Kristen and Mark Dracos that we're on. Which application are we on?
Yeah. You want to Kristen and Mark.
The Dragos.
Okay,
Kristen and
all
Mark
right, thank you. This is a property that has been before this board. There's two recommended comments. First is that notwithstanding the March 27, 2024 Conservation Board resolution of conditional approval, as well as the subsequent acceptance of the survey as prepared by Aerial Land Surveying dated June 11, 2022, last revised April 26, 2024, which was filed with the pending application. The board does not support the granting of a variance to construct a three-story house. Second, denial of the requested third-floor attic living area relief is being recommended in order to protect the Great Peconic Bay wetland ecosystem, as well as its public values and benefits from the individual and cumulative adverse impacts of development intensification.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Richard A. Hand.
This pending variance application for the ZBA.
Did I skip one? And I skipped one. I messed up the last one too, but the last one,
let's
you
figure
corrected it there. So now we're doing Andrew Brandman and Kira Brandman.
This application relates to an existing residentially developed property that has frontage on Fish Cove. There are several recommended advisory comments. First, indicates that a Conservation Board wetland permit application was filed on May 23rd, 2024, in order to seek approval for the planned home expansion, along with the survey as prepared by Jeff Hader, with a latest revision date of May 20, 2024, a copy of which was likewise submitted with the pending variance application. As a consequence, a notice of incomplete application was issued on May 31, 2024, which requested various survey revisions, and that was in order to better highlight the full scope of the required wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer, which is established pursuant to covenant recorded with the Suffolk County Clerk in 1999. The applicant was also advised that the requisite buffer is at present non-compliant. Second, the notice and complete application further informed the applicant there are a host of improvements which were completed at the subject parcel, which need to be removed, legalized, or otherwise addressed by the pending variance by the pending wetland permit application. These include, among others, construction of a wood kayak rack, reconfigured and extended lower and upper wood retaining wall, stockade fence along the north property line, paver patio and paver walks and steps to the water, slate walls, and northerly paver patio and barbecue. Thirdly, in response, the applicant emailed a preliminary marked up survey on June 18, 2024, in order to get further clarity with regards to the scope of existing and proposed structural and hardscape improvements that could be approved or legalized. Needed feedback was emailed to the applicant by the town on July 15, 2024. However, the requisite revised survey has not yet been received, as the applicant is awaiting further commentary with regards to needed wetland impact mitigation consistent with an August email. Lastly, notwithstanding the above, there are no significant environmental concerns regarding the proposed two-story residential addition and attached garage for which variances are being sought, as the building of the intended structures would comply with the requisite wetland construction setbacks and will also be sufficiently mitigated by IAOWTS installation, as well as by required restoration of wetlands and naturally vegetated wetland buffers.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Richard A. Hand.
This application relates to a residentially developed property in Sag Harbor that recently received an administrative wetland permit. The recommended advisory comments are as follows. First, as reported by the applicant, the construction of the proposed one-story apartment for which a variance is being sought has already been authorized pursuant to administrative wetland permit number WAP 23084, which was issued on December 18, 2023. Second, the survey as prepared by Dave Saskis with a latest revision date of March 7, 2024, which was filed with the pending variance application, is consistent with the survey, and I referenced the survey dates, which was approved by the Chief Environmental Analyst on February 23, 2024. Thirdly, there are no significant environmental concerns regarding the proposed one-story residential accessory apartment and attached garage, for which variances are currently being sought, as the building of the intended structures would comply with the requisite wetland construction setbacks and be sufficiently mitigated by IAOWTS installation, as well as by required restoration of naturally vegetated wetland, non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffers.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Roger and Jennifer Morales.
This is not correct. This is not the advisory report I prepared. So I guess we're going to have to put this application on hold until the next meeting, unless Karina, you can download the report and we can address it later in the meeting. So we should move on to the next ZBA referral.
Okay, Helen Roble and Tal Iwal.
This is a project on Pine Avenue in Flanders. It came before this board. There are 3 recommended advisory comments. First is that the planned residential 2-story addition for which pyramid law relief is being sought has already been approved pursuant to Conservation Board Wetland Permit number CB 23066, which was originally issued on November 6, 2023, subsequently revised on November 30th, 2023. Such approval was conditioned upon the establishment of a wetland preservation area and a naturally vegetated wetland non-disturbance non-fertilization buffer, pursuant to the covenant recorded with the Suffolk County Clerk on November 3rd, 2023, and the library and page numbers are referenced. Second, the survey is prepared by Jeff Haderer, dated November 25, 2020, last revised August 2nd, 2023, which was filed with the pending application, was approved by the Conservation Board pursuant to Wetland Permit number CB 23066. Lastly, there are no significant environmental concerns regarding the proposed 2-story addition for which variance is currently being sought, as the planned home elevation and expansion would be sufficiently mitigated by IAOWTS installation, as well as by required restoration of naturally vegetated wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffers, and native landscaping.
Motion to send those comments to the ZBA.
All in favor? Opposed? The administrative wetland permits are in your packets. We'll move on to the resolution of conditional approval. A 023041, Grace Lynn Edwards, Life Estate, and Jennifer Ann Standing. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second?
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Graceland Edwards Life Estate and Jennifer Ann Standing for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 024023, Nancy and Peter Lubinov. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Nancy Lubinov and Peter Lubinov for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Preliminary review, secret determination, A 023024, James Orlowski and Carolyn Orlowski.
This application relates to an existing residentially developed property on Mill Road in the hamlet of Remsenburg, Spionk. Property has frontage on the upper Spionk River and supports town and state regulated tidal wetlands. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated August 28, 2024. The application has been made in order to gain this board's approval to install an in-ground swimming pool. No patio or decking is planned at this time. There are some structural and hardscape improvements at the site that need to be legalized, including an expanded stone drive. There are fence lines that need to be reconfigured. There are minor concrete retaining walls that can be legalized. And up at the house, which is much further back from the wetlands, the wood deck and balcony had been rebuilt, so that needs to be legalized as well. This is a property that's encumbered by a 100-foot easement, which was taken from the tie line rather than the wetland boundary, which I flagged, which is at a considerable distance landward. In order to offset the wetland impacts, these planned improvements and those activities that need to be legalized, I provided a sketch to the applicant, which is on file, of a covenanted wetland preservation area, naturally vegetated buffer that needs to be established and restored. Providing guidance to the applicant as to how to reclaim those areas. The applicant is fully amenable to those wetland impact mitigative measures. Accordingly, this is an application for which we have sufficient information to make a determination. As such, I'm recommending that the public hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing.
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 024009, Fiona Sabani.
This is an application that's been filed for planned improvements at a large residence that has very extensive freshwater wetlands consisting of wooded swamps, and is also marked by a large freshwater pond. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated September 9, 2024. The applicant is looking for this board's approval in order to install a secondary driveway to facilitate deliveries to the residents. They're looking to expand the living area of the home, to remove a screen room and build a much larger screen room, to construct a much larger deck area. There are other minor improvements such as outdoor kitchen areas and various walkways and stairs which need to be permitted as well. The DEC, upon reviewing this application, asks that the landowner offset the coverage of an pervious surfaces by planting native vegetation at a 2-to-1 ratio. So the plan that you're seeing is showing DEC required native planting area alongside the proposed extended driveway. Upon visiting the premises and reviewing the history, which dates back to a 1993 Conservation Board permit that was issued under a former wetland law, Chapter 157, over the many subsequent years. There were many changes and improvements that were made at this property without requisite wetland and building permits. All of those improvements now need to be addressed as part of this pending application. There's also a considerable amount of unauthorized clearing that occurred at the property. While I'm generally supportive of the residential expansion, I did ask the applicant to come forward with a recovery plan for the site and have provided a preliminary recommended wetland preservation area, naturally vegetated buffer for the site, which aims to address and restore all those areas that have been cleared without authorization since 93. In order to better identify all of the activities unauthorized activities that need to be addressed as part of this pending application, I've asked the applicant to provide an existing conditions survey because such survey is not currently available as part of the town records, and it's somewhat difficult to work off the survey that you see before you, showing the overlay of the planned improvements. So this is an application for which significant additional information is needed in order to make a determination. As such, I am recommending that a public hearing be scheduled.
Motion to waive public hearing?
No.
Let's schedule.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm all right. Falling asleep.
Second.
Motion to schedule a public hearing for October 23rd, 2024.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby schedules the public hearing for October 23rd, 2024, and that a notice of public hearing be published in the town designated newspaper pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-8C of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 024017, Sean Casey and Pamela Casey.
This is an application that relates to an existing residentially developed property in the hamlet of East Quogue. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated September 5, 2022. The application has been made because the landowner is seeking to remove and replace many of the existing accessory structures with either new similar structures or larger expanded additional structures. Property is somewhat constrained. It has bulkheaded frontage on the open waters of Shinnecock Bay. It abuts on the west side a sand beach, and then on the east side it abuts considerable naturally vegetated tidal wetlands that are in private ownership that fortunately have been put in preservation as a consequence of an administrative wetland permit that I issued. In order to proceed with the proposed residential improvements, which include building of a new pool, patio, pool house, a hot tub, detached garage, reconfigured drive, septic upgrade, and expanded seaside deck. Significant relief is needed from the required wetland construction setbacks. So what I provided the applicant with is a sketch showing what I think makes sense in the long term in terms of the establishment of restored or natural vegetation and buffers, while yet providing needed access around the residence and a significant lawn area on the seaward side of the residence. It takes in those portions of the property that are most vulnerable to storm flooding and overwash. Those areas would be covenanted, lawn would be removed, and those areas would be planted out in seaside suitable native vegetation. The applicant has agreed to those wetland mitigative measures. As such, we have sufficient information to make a determination on the application. Accordingly, I'm recommending that the public hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive public hearing.
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution of conditional approval, A 023024, James Orlowski and Carolyn Orlowski. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to James Orlowski and Carolyn Orlowski for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 024017, Sean Casey and Pamela Casey. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to Sean Casey and Pamela Casey for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth herein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So the pending ZBA variance application that I asked that we skip over because the advisory report is not in this packet. I can give you a quick summation of what the advisory report says because the variance application is of little significance. This is a property on Sagaponic Road. It has an existing home. The home is separated by the nearest freshwater wetlands by an existing drive. The improvements for which variances are needed have all been authorized by administrative wetland permit, with the exception of an addition to the house, which upon review of the historical records, I found that that addition actually predates the effective date of the wetlands law. So the advisory report that was drafted is short. It indicates either all the items that warrant variances have already been authorized by administrative wetland permit, or they don't require a wetland permit because the construction predates the wetland law. So I don't know if you want to vote on it based on that summation, or if you'd rather just postpone it until the next meeting.
Motion to send those comments to the ZBA.
All right, thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all.